The national focus on the pandemic and more apparent racial divide has affected local officials in Boston. On the city council, this has resulted in new initiatives around policing, public health, and housing. And one of the housing initiatives is a proposal for more testing to prevent discrimination. Joining us is one of the supporters of that proposal, the district city councilor representing Jamaica Plain and West Roxbury, Matt O'Malley. Thank you very much for being with us, councilor.
Always great to be with you, Chris.
Councilor, there are a number of things that are brewing right now with the council of some kind of reform, one way or the other. The anti-discrimination testing, this follows that study that just came out a few weeks ago about what's happened in Boston. I think very few of us were surprised that there was still discrimination, but what about the level of discrimination reported by that study? What did you feel about that?
No, I think that's an absolutely accurate characterization, Chris. It was not surprising to reinforce the data, which would suggest that there is still rampant discrimination in housing in Greater Boston. What I think was shocking to many people was what the level was. It was about a year-long study conducted by Suffolk University Law School that demonstrated that 71% of prospective Black tenants face discrimination in the Greater Boston housing market, and a staggering 86% of those who had a affordable housing voucher or a Section 8 voucher in some cases face discrimination as well. It underscored that we need to take some real action, and that's one of the reasons why I put forth this proposal to create a fair housing testing system and a real proactive approach to not only address this issue and eventually fix this issue, but to collect data, increase public education, and demonstrate real enforcement.
Now, a lot of people might suppose that if you're victimized by discrimination, you know it when it's happening. But as this testing report details, it's not easy to know that you're being discriminated against.
No, that's right. There's, discrimination with a smile, I think, is one way that they referenced it, where oftentimes a prospective tenant will just not have the same opportunity because of the color of his or her skin or their ability to pay. And right now, we actually do a pretty good job in the city. We have the Office of Fair Housing. DND has taken a very proactive approach to this. But oftentimes, we get complaints and then we investigate the complaints after the fact. One thing that I think the Suffolk University study showed was that this is a widespread enough problem that we need to be a lot more aggressive in how we root this out and how we address this. And that's why I'm proposing something akin to a secret shopper program a large retail or supermarket may have, just as a way to get out there, partnering with some housing advocates, looking at particularly law students as well from Suffolk or other university law schools or colleges, to make sure that we can send individuals out here and to stop this problem. This is a real problem. And as we find ourselves in this moment looking to really address all levels of discrimination and racism, structurally, institutionally, overtly, this is a way that we can address it as it relates to housing.
Well, the push for reform this year, it did turn into some drama around the city budget. Some councilors wanted to hold off approval to get more changes. You voted to approve the budget. That was the majority vote. But
Yep.
some of the people who voted for that still want to make some more changes. Let's say, what about the money the city spends on the police department? Do you want to make some changes there?
Oh, there's no question I do. That's one of the reasons why I've partnered with several colleagues, looking at the police contract, looking at overtime, looking at ways that we can reimagine what policing means. I think your question is right that we can actually push for meaningful change in reform, and it's not necessarily dependent on one budget vote. As you know, had we voted down that budget, we would have gone into what's known as a 1/12 budget until a new budget was agreed upon. That likely would have meant increased or dramatic layoffs of city workers. It also would have jeopardized some of the state funding that we were getting. So it's important that we don't conflate the two issues. We absolutely, in my opinion, had a budget that, while not perfect, did have a lot of investments already as it related to decreased overtime spending for Boston Police, increased public health money that we desperately needed as we find ourselves still very much in the midst of a pandemic. But to answer your question, as it relates to significant reform and really anti-racist initiatives and legislation that we need to put forward, we're going to continue to do that. I have been so impressed with my colleagues in the last several months as it really relates to putting forth some aggressive and important initiatives, many of which, if not all of which, I've co-sponsored and co-signed, and looking forward to continuing the work. This fair housing amendment is, or excuse me, this fair housing testing program is just one small way. But as it relates to really addressing institutional, overt, structural racism in Boston is beyond. It has to not only be about public safety and policing, but it has to be about health disparities. It has to be about education. It has to be about housing. It has to be about environmental initiatives. We're going to continue to do the work in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Well, speaking of budgets in years ahead, there was a proposal from one of your colleagues, Lydia Edwards, to give the councilors more leverage in the budget process. It would still largely be with the mayor, but the council would have a stronger hand. Do you think that's worth at least exploring?
No question is it not only worth exploring, it's worth happening. I've been talking about this for quite some time. When I first ran for this district seat nearly 10 years ago, I talked about allowing the council to have a line item veto type provision as it relates to the budget process. So I commend Councilor Edwards, co-sponsored this initiative when she put it forward. Obviously, there's a lot of work that has to happen, including work at the legislature to have it happen. We haven't changed the city charter in quite some time. I believe the mid-1990s around the structure of the school committee may have been the last time that we did that. But any city constitution or city charter is a living, breathing document. I think allowing the council to play a more active role in the budget negotiations, in setting up what budgets should look like and how we should spend money is absolutely crucial. As it stands now, we can only zero out budgets or vote budgets up or down, zero out particularly departments. This is a way that we could actually help work not only with the mayor, but with the people of Boston to put an even better budget going forward. So I think there's tremendous merit to the idea. I support it, and I look forward to watching the process unfold.
Another thing you're looking at down the road is trying to change the policy around development in Boston so we have more buildings that are net zero on carbon emissions. It sounds a little abstract maybe, but why is it important to have that?
Well, it's important because we're a coastal city who's already seen the ravages of climate change and how major weather events can absolutely wreak havoc on cities, particularly coastal cities like Boston. We're a city where close to 3/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions come from our buildings. We have an older building stock, and we have seen definitively time after time that the most effective way to lower these greenhouse gas emission rates is to look at how we build our buildings, and to not only build energy efficient buildings and LEED certified buildings, but truly net zero carbon buildings. And a difference between this proposal now than perhaps 5, 6, 7 years ago when we were first talking about it is that it actually is more financially not only sustainable, but reasonable to build net zero carbon than sort of traditional buildings now. So you can save money for the ratepayer, for the taxpayer. You can address our very high greenhouse gas emissions rate. You can build a more resilient city and a more sustainable city. And it's something that it's high time we do it. I was very proud last year to be with the mayor as he signed an executive order based on this hearing order that I did that will mandate all new municipal buildings will be net zero carbon. You've seen countless examples of municipalities who, again, have built things NZC and saved money. Think of the Hastings School up in Lexington, which generates, I think, 500,000 more kilowatt hours of energy that it produces every year that goes back into the town supply. So these are things that we can do that are going to be good for the ratepayer, good for the taxpayers of Boston, and provide not only an environmental impact, but a public health and an equity impact as well. This is something that we've been pushing for quite some time. We're going to get this done, and it's going to have a real profound impact on the sustainability and the vibrancy and the protection of Boston.
Well, when people think about vibrancy in your district, in the past, it would be things like Bella Luna Pizza, the Latin Quarter.
Yeah.
In recent news, of course, we hear about a setback in some of the aspirations for the Latin Quarter, and also about the closing of Bella Luna. How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's heartbreaking. I loved it. I had my 22nd birthday at the old Bella Luna Milky Way in Hyde Square when it was down in Hyde Square on Center Street. Was heartbroken when it moved, understood why it had to move. Literally, a parade was thrown in Jamaica Plain when it moved, and many folks followed Kathy and Carol, the co-owners, down to their new location. It's where I had my victory party when I was first elected. It's heartbreaking to hear the news. I reached out to Kathy as soon as I had heard. I think it's more of a vibrant and really heart-wrenching example of how the coronavirus is going to have such a significant impact on so many of our small businesses, particularly our restaurants. And as you relate to sort of the Latin Quarter as well, Blessed Sacrament Church, this is a church. My mother taught at Blessed Sacrament School as when I was a child, when she was younger, obviously. Remember going to that church for Christmas, for a bilingual Christmas Eve Mass. I was so delighted when the Hyde Square Task Force was able to buy it. I still support their vision of having a vibrant community art space. I know funding is going to be very, very difficult, so I'm hopeful that we can somehow save that and protect the vision that the Hyde Square Task Force and many residents of Jamaica Plain share in protecting that building is a real community use. It's a gorgeous, absolutely beautiful old church. But as it relates to Bella Luna and Milky Way and Doyle's, this has been a tough year for some really beloved Jamaica Plain landmarks. And I would just urge all of your viewers to, if you are able, support our local businesses, particularly our local restaurants. Even if you don't eat it now, buy gift certificates for when hopefully things get a little healthier on the pandemic front. But it's so important to support these local businesses so that they can survive. They absolutely are the economic engine of every neighborhood, which is the economic engine of our city.